I thought I'd go ahead and do a free and slave states, North and South, and compromise video to help you review for the test. So I hope that you have your review sheet, your study guide handy, and we will go through all the information. It's not necessarily in order, but it should make sense the order that it is in. And hopefully we'll cover everything on here, just about everything in here. And if we don't cover something, then you should be able to find it in your notes or on the website with no problem. So let's start by reviewing our North and South. In the North, it was an urban society, which means it was cities, and the economy was very industrial, and that economy supported the laws and the tariffs that protected their businesses from foreign countries. They thought the national government should be strong and that the Union was not to be separated. They also believed that slavery was morally wrong and inhumane. So those are our general information that we studied about the North. Now in the South, we see this rural agricultural society, which means country, out in the country, and farms, villages, and plantations. Farming was almost everybody's job. And they did not want those high taxes, those tariffs, because they were afraid of not being able to sell their cotton to other countries, specifically cotton. They thought that the state should have the power to say if a law was legal or illegal, depending on whether it agreed or disagreed with the state laws. They thought states should have more power in the government. They also thought that slaves were property and not people, and they were afraid that their economy would just totally collapse if they didn't have slavery. The slave states were the states that it had been decided that it was legal to own slaves. Most of these were in the South part of the country, and there were about 11 of these states. And the free states were the states where mostly were in the North, and that was where slavery was completely illegal, and there were 11 of these states as well. And here's our map. This is the map that we colored. We didn't do the free territories, the slave territories, or the unorganized territories on your map. At this point in time, there's 11 free states and 11 slave states, and those are indicated by the pink and the blue colors here on the map. So then we move into these compromises. The Missouri Compromise happened in 1820, and it allowed Missouri to come into the United States as a slave state. And then Maine was able to come in as a free state. They also drew that Missouri Compromise line to decide the issue of slavery for future states. Now here's a map of our Missouri Compromise, and you can see Missouri is located right here. Maine is way up here. And you can see our red Missouri Compromise line. In the future, states north of the line would be free, and south of the line would be slave states. Now, this was a compromise that had to be made because they wanted to keep everything even in Congress. So if they added a free state, they needed to add a slave state. They added a slave state, they wanted to add a free state. That way, the votes were equal. This slide is actually has a typo on it. It says there's 5 points to the to the Compromise of 1850, but as you can see, there's only 3. California came in during the Compromise of 1850 as a free state. The slave trade was banned in Washington, D.C., and the fugitive slave laws were made. It had gone 30 years between the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850, and they truly thought that this would be the final settlement between the North and the South. And you can see here, this is our map of the Compromise of 1850. California is over here, and it's admitted as a free state. And then we have a red star over here where Washington, D.C. is, indicating to remind you that that was where slavery was banned, or slave trade was banned, excuse me. And then the Fugitive Slave Act was requiring all citizens to help catch the runaway slaves, and anyone who helped a runaway slave would be fined or imprisoned. A lot of the Northerners helped them anyway, and this is the part of the Underground Railroad when it became very strong and even more popular. Then our final compromise is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. They The large portions of land in the West wanted to be two states, Kansas and Nebraska. They couldn't say, oh, they're just free since they were in the northern part of the country, because all of our Southerners would be upset because that would mess with the balance of things. So they decided to let each state have popular sovereignty, which is this voting to decide whether they were going to be free states or slave states. Because of all this, we see a lot of conflict going on in Kansas. And here is our Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now remember, here's our Missouri Compromise line. So they thought, even though they kind of had repealed the compromise for the Missouri Compromise, they thought that these two areas would just automatically become free, but they gave them popular sovereignty, which is like a popular vote. We talked about bleeding Kansas or bloody Kansas also in class. This is the pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces that were fighting in Kansas to try to get the vote swayed their way. And John Brown believed God chosen him to end slavery, so he took men, seized and killed slavery supporters, and ended up being something that federal troops had to come in and put an end to. So just a quick recap of all of our facts. We see the states wanted to be evenly represented in Congress. So in 1820, when Missouri wanted to become a state, Maine was added so things would stay even. Then a line was drawn 36 degrees and 30 minutes north as part of the Missouri Compromise. So any future states would be free if they were above that line, or slave if they were below that line. In 1850, we see another conflict come in as California was added. And so as a part of the Compromise of 1850, California came in as a free state. Washington, D.C. banned slave trade, and we have the Fugitive Slave Acts added so that every citizen was expected to capture and return any runaway slaves. And this backfired because the Underground Railroad system became stronger and Northerners just didn't like slavery even more. And then when the North of the Louisiana Purchase, anything there applied for statehood, the slavery issue came back into view, and it just became another conflict. So now we see the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and it allowed Kansas and Nebraska, as they became states, to have popular sovereignty so that they could decide. And then finally, pro-slavery people rushed into Kansas, and they won the vote, allowing Kansas to become a slave state, despite John Brown's efforts. The anti-slavery supporters were upset. There was a lot of violence. John Brown led raids on people and killed many, and federal troops had to be sent to stop the conflict in bleeding Kansas. So that is it. I hope that this review helped you fill out your study guide and get ready for your test tomorrow. And I will see you in class tomorrow. Bye, guys.